Can businesses require their employees to get the COVID-19 vaccine? Elaine Turner is a shareholder and partner in the law firm of Hall Estill. Hello, Elaine.
Hello, Robert. How are you today?
I'm good. And so this is the big question that everybody's asking right now for obvious reasons. And that is, can employers outside the healthcare industry mandate that all employees take a vaccine when it's available?
So, some employers can, yes. And you've mentioned the healthcare industry. There are other industries that potentially would qualify under federal laws to be able to mandate vaccines. For instance, first responders, firefighters, police officers. So yes, some employers can mandate COVID-19 mandatory vaccine policies.
Oh, but you say some, and you made some very specific conditions in that regard. You're saying that a typical office environment or a retail environment or anything of that kind would not be subject to the mandatory vaccine?
So, it's interesting to know we're talking about a vaccine that has only obtained emergency use approval by the FDA. And so it's important to consider that first. And the research that I've seen and the media coverage that I've seen so far shows there's a very strong movement. Employers really aren't, even healthcare employers aren't ready to mandate this particular vaccine because of the emergency approval, and also because of there is a large percentage of the public that, for whatever reason, is reluctant to take it. So I really think it's important to factor that in first. And then if we're just talking about any type of vaccine, something that had been fully approved by the FDA, every employer is not entitled to mandate in every circumstance. So if we're talking about COVID-19 and we're talking about the workplace, my office, everyone is as susceptible to get it here as they would in any other work environment, in a retail store or even in a hospital. So each employer, before they develop a policy about vaccines in general or the COVID-19 vaccine, needs to sit down and really determine under the law, would they need to, in order to protect their employees, to protect the public, mandate the vaccine, or are there other ways to be able to accomplish avoiding the spread within the office?
Other ways such as masks and plexiglass and distancing
Working
of employees,
remotely.
the kind of stuff that a lot of companies are going to be doing or already doing for those workers who are actually on the job as opposed to working remotely. But just to complicate things, I imagine, are there not a number of regulations and laws and bodies that need to weigh in on this? For instance, I understand that the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has yet to issue an opinion on that. Is that correct?
Well, actually, a little bit of breaking news. Within the shortly before Christmas, the EEOC did weigh in on the issue and reiterated that while employers can mandate a vaccine, employers cannot mandate a vaccine as to every single employee without exception. And so the important exceptions are, first of all, establishing whether or not an employer, like a healthcare employer, is in the type of environment where they need to mandate the vaccine in order to allow people to be able to perform the essential functions of their job. You don't want your surgeon to be contagious. But beyond that, the two exceptions are whether or not the individual has a medical condition, which may qualify as an ADA disability, and they're in need of an accommodation. The accommodation being not getting the vaccine and potentially being able to perform their job in another way without the vaccine, wearing a face covering or social distancing, or maybe even a job transfer. If something is available, if there is a position available for which that individual is qualified, where they no longer have contact with the public or other employees that would prevent the spread. And the other exception would be a religious accommodation. Does the individual have a sincerely held religious belief which prevents or precludes them from getting the vaccine? And are they entitled to an accommodation for that sincerely held religious belief under Title VII?
Any precedent on the religious belief side for any past type of health issue that involves some kind of emergency or some kind of vaccine in the past that where this became an issue?
Yes, there are a handful of cases that have come out over the years that relate to other vaccines, the flu vaccine, rubella, other types of vaccines, where individuals claimed that because of their sincerely held religious belief, they could not get the vaccine. And what the courts focus on, number one, is it a sincerely held religious belief, or is it a personal belief? A personal belief that doesn't rise to the level of that type of protection under Title VII.
Mm-hmm.
And really, how the cases come out depend upon the facts. In one of the cases that I'm familiar with, the court evaluated what the employee was saying about their relief. And what the court determined was it really was a personal belief about risks that may or may not be present when it comes to taking vaccine, something injected into your body. And for that reason, they lost their Title VII claim and were not entitled to religious accommodation. In other cases, there are individuals with sincerely held religious beliefs that were allowed an exemption.
Kind of reminds me of the draft situation back in the 60s with the concept of a conscientious objector. In some cases, there was a religious component. In some cases, there was not, but they were still allowed to have that status if they could convince the court that indeed they held those deeply held beliefs. But I don't know, nothing to do with this or not.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think something that's going to be very interesting to watch, and all employers really need to do this, is so the EEOC is now spoken as the COVID-19 vaccine. What is going to happen at the state level? And so the states all vary in their application of vaccine requirements as to other vaccines. And so, for instance, here in Oklahoma, there's a statute that allows parents to exempt their school-age children from vaccines based on not only medical issues or religious issues, but upon personal belief. So there are some states, there's not a lot of them, but there are some states that have allowed personal belief exemptions when it comes to vaccines. And so I'll be very curious to see if that happens with relationship to the COVID-19 vaccine.
Yeah, boy, there's a fine line there, it seems. Also, you were just to get back to your talking about an individual in an office space that might be considered to have or claim a medical condition that would preclude them or prevent them from accepting the vaccine. What if we flipped that? What if we said this individual had a medical condition that made them more susceptible to the virus and that therefore they demanded that the people around them take the vaccine to protect them?
So that's a very interesting dilemma for employers. And so employers are already facing on a daily basis the the determination as to whether or not they need to accommodate individuals who are at high risk and how they do that. And so one of the ways they've been doing it is with telework. But now you raise the issue of whether or not the employer will be able to mandate COVID-19 vaccines in order to protect this individual who's at high risk. That circumstance will not change the rule as to whether or not an employer can mandate the vaccine. I'm sorry, it has to be job related and consistent with business necessity. And
Mhm.
so if there are other ways to accommodate that individual, then those are the routes that the employer is going to take. And so as to that individual who's at high risk, trying to mandate the vaccine for all of their workers, coworkers, the thing that we need to remember is everyone who has a job needs to be able to perform the essential functions of that job with or without accommodation. And so if this high risk individual is prevented from being able to perform the work and there is no accommodation or reasonable accommodation available to them that allows them to perform the job, then they're the ones that may have to exit. They may have to find something else.
Mhm.
And I would submit to you that forcing coworkers to have a vaccine under all of the circumstances that we've talked about is not a reasonable accommodation.
Yeah. The ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, I understand has some language in it about a high level of disability. How is that determined? That sounds like a little bit of a fuzzy criterion.
Well, so the standard under the ADA, the disability has to substantially limit someone in their daily activities in order to the rise to the level of a disability. And so there is abundant case law on how that is tested, how that is determined. And it really boils down to a case by case circumstance. I may have diabetes that I control with a simple prescription, and it doesn't impact me at all. While you may be diabetic, and even high doses of insulin don't control it adequately, and you do have limitations on your daily activities. So your diabetic condition qualifies while mine does not.
Hmm. Wow. And then I guess I just to get back real quickly to a job in which you are coming into contact with large members of the public. I'm talking about mostly like a retail operation or any type of theater that you might be involved in if you're an employee. Again, that doesn't mean that you can be mandated or required to take it if the employer can find other ways to protect you. It sounds like this is what you're saying. There's no real hard, fast line here. Uh,
That's exactly correct. That's
yeah.
exactly correct. So, you walk into Target or you walk into a theater, those businesses will not be able to mandate that every employee get the vaccine, number one. And really, no business, even a hospital that cares for extraordinarily sick individuals who, if they contracted this virus or something else, would die.
Mhm.
Even those employers still have to offer the potential exemptions, accommodations in form of disability accommodation and religious accommodation.
Boy, what a complex issue with very fuzzy lines to worry about. But Elaine Turner, I think you've gone a long way toward helping to clarify what the questions are that businesses need to be taking into account when they make this decision as to whether to attempt to mandate a vaccine for their employees or not. But thank you so much for being with me today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Robert.